So my early experience with that, my son threatened because he was experiencing psychosis, and of course the police got involved and he was arrested. I was very ashamed to talk about that because as a black person, you don't want to know you're part of the crime problem. Unfortunately, we ended up in the court system and the police officer was not nice. She had asked to do an interview at my home. She had given me a certain time. She arrived early and she forced her way into my home, which was very discouraging. I have a psychotic person who now sees the police barging in. He's a young black man. It was not exciting. Unfortunately, we did end up in the court system. And when he was found guilty, she laughed at us and pointed her finger. So we definitely need to address how we treat people and the assumptions we make of who people are, because the assumption is he's a nobody, he comes from nowhere. And this is a young man who was very ambitious, had completed high school, was on his way in college when he was diagnosed. The lawyers we hire also makes a difference. If you do not hire a lawyer who understands mental illness, you will probably experience bad results because they too do not understand mental illness. So that's been my experience. I understand that more officers are being trained and are being made aware of mental illness so that the approach is much kinder. I'm not sure it's thorough enough, and I'm not sure as many officers are trained well enough on how to deal with these issues. Of course, you may come up on a scene that you don't know exactly the background of that person, but if you've been told there's a mental health issue, then it needs to be dealt with differently.
The attitude that I see towards people with mental illness in Kenora is shameful. Yes, there are people who are accepting of those with mental illness, but we have a high population of people with mental illness who are transient, who live on the street, who are living in the shelter, who are living in below poverty and in poverty situations. And the clientele that I work with in ACT is the most severe that you're going to see. They're severe and persistent. They're mostly schizophrenia and with some bipolar, and they're degraded, in my opinion. The community doesn't see them as valuable, as being able to contribute anything worthwhile to the community. Trying to find housing for our clients is awful because landlords don't want to rent to anyone who has a mental illness, who's on ODSP, who's on Ontario Works. I think that Kenora has a lot of growing to do in far as developing a decent attitude towards people who have mental illness.
I'd had her admitted to the hospital over and over again in that period of a couple of months while she was psychotic, and every time I tried to do it, I ended up being more and more exhausted because she was manic too at the time, and so I couldn't get any sleep. And because my wife and I are lesbian, our families are not a big support group for us. They would rather not deal with our being lesbian, but certainly they can't handle the fact that we have mental illness. And so there was just me and my dogs and her trying to wind our way through this forest of obstacles and scary things.